Howdy folks, I'm the Comics Kid 2099, and as is tradition around here on Saturdays, I am going to talk to you about an episode of an animated superhero TV series. Today, I'm here to talk about the Season 1 episode of Batman Beyond titled Dead Man's Hand. But before I get into the actual reviewy part of this video, allow me to quickly sum up the plot for those of you who haven't seen the episode, or if you have but you'd still like a refresher on what went down. We open with the introduction of the Royal Flush Gang, a family of supervillains who have been active for quite some time. To hear Bruce Wayne tell the story, they've been active for centuries, maybe. They are robbing a yacht, and Batman stops them. Meanwhile, because of his Batmanly duties, Terry misses a date with the second worst human being in history, Dana. She yells at him, and they basically break up. 3 seconds later, Terry begins a relationship with a girl named Melanie, who, surprise surprise, is the youngest member of the Royal Flush Gang. Terry and Melanie hit it off right away, and this causes frustration to develop between Melanie and her family, and Terry and Bruce respectively. Soon, Terry finds out that Melanie is part of the Royal Flush Gang, and eventually defeats them. Bruce offers to tell Terry a story about himself and Selina Kyle, and cue credits. First and foremost, this is no doubt my all-time favorite version of the Royal Flush Gang, largely because it was my first exposure to the team, and also it's one of the only versions of this team that I am familiar with. I've never read any comic book with the team, I didn't much care for the version from Arrow, and while I did like the versions that we got to see in Justice League Unlimited, they weren't quite as memorable as this team that we got in this episode and in this series. And even if you are not familiar with the other versions of the Royal Flush Gang, to compare to this one, there's no denying that this is just really cool. We've seen lots of legacy superheroes before. Flash, Green Lantern, Hawkman. Heck, this very series makes use of the idea of passing the torch. It's a concept that's been passed around the block a few times, for superheroes anyway, but you never hear about legacy supervillains, and that's just a neat idea to explore, I think. And this episode does a pretty great job of it, considering how little time it actually has to explore that idea. Now, let's talk a little bit about Dana. I've never made it a secret that I do not like Dana. It never used to be this bad until maybe the last year or so. I don't know if it's that she reminds me so much of Lana Lang, one of the most useless characters in television history, but she just does not work for me. To put this into perspective, in the past I have stated that Terry could have had a better girlfriend in the form of Melanie from this episode, or Max, a peer who is later introduced in the series. Both of these characters just seem more compatible with Terry. Even considering Melanie's criminality, she still makes a better girlfriend for Terry than the shrewish, impossible-to-please Dana. Seriously, go back and watch the whole series and keep count of how many times Dana indirectly yells at Terry for being Batman. We've already seen it twice, and we're not even halfway through the first season. But not only would these characters just be better for Terry, but I also really think that they are more interesting as characters. Melanie especially. It may seem played out and obvious to make the love interest a villain, and this episode even acknowledges that with the ending, but there's no denying that putting your two romantic leads on opposite sides of a dramatic conflict provides much more opportunities for interesting stories than putting them both on the same side. Admittedly, this episode doesn't really do anything with that, but if Melanie was an ongoing character in this series in the same way that Dana is, I do think that we could have had some unique stories pop up. I know I've spent way more time on this one very minor part of the episode than I really should have, but she just really annoys me so very much. It would be one thing if she knew that Terry was Batman. Then I could at least understand her getting huffy at Terry because he's risking his life daily and he is skipping his dates with her. But as far as Dana knows, Terry is just doing a part-time job and school. Those two things would not mix very well together under any circumstances. But when you add girlfriend to the mix, especially a whiny shrew of a girlfriend like Dana, it just becomes a confluence of impossible things mixed together. Surely Dana can cut Terry a little bit of slack for having to juggle so many balls. But no. That's all I have to say about this for now, but trust me, we will be talking about this later on in the series. I do have to say that it is a lot ridiculous that Terry meets Melanie, and about 5 seconds later they are kissing. Yeah, she kissed him, he did not kiss back. And yeah, this episode is only 20 minutes long, and that just isn't a long enough time to let these elements play out in a way that would be believable. For instance, if this was being believable, after Terry and Dana have their little spat, Terry and Melanie really should have gotten to know each other over the course of about a week instead of about 5 seconds. Likewise, Terry and Dana's breakup seems very manufactured, even though it is in character for Dana to act the way that she did in this episode. It's times like this that I really wish that this series was more serialized while still maintaining the standalone episode format that it has. Things like relationships between characters can sometimes really suffer when you have to get through everything in 22 minutes. Can you imagine how awesome it would have been if Terry had met Melanie and maybe he didn't even find out who she was for 3 or 4 episodes and he was growing closer to her during that time before the big episode where Terry finds out? That's how I imagine it would have happened if this was a comic book sort of in the vein of the Spider-Man comics from the 1960s, allowing the subplots to breathe and have enough room to play out in a believable manner while not stretching out the main plot of any given episode. So the argument between Bruce and Terry is absurd and feels about as manufactured as the argument between Terry and Dana. Seriously, Terry, you're yelling at Bruce because he is saying that the Royal Flush Gang is going to strike tonight. You claim that he has no proof and that it's just a hunch, which, yeah, you're right. But Bruce said that they were going to strike the night before, and he was right. You have no reason to believe that he's off base on this one other than you want to get in Melanie's pants. But still, even though this argument is the second or third worst thing in this entire episode, it does provide a fantastic line from Bruce, which is maybe the best part of the entire episode. When Terry tells Bruce that one night won't make any difference, Bruce's response is fantastic. One night always makes a difference. Of course, he would think this, keeping in mind his origin story. In fact, you would think that Terry would also have this same philosophy, considering his own origin story. But that's why I said it's manufactured and is just thrown in there to generate drama, and doesn't actually feel organic with these characters. Overall, this episode is fun in premise, but in execution, it stumbles a lot. It's like when you gamble on a runner who has a really good track record, and then they place 5th place in a race. I still enjoy this episode because of the eternally cool Royal Flush Gang, and every time I watch this episode, I still wish that Terry and Melanie could have had more of a run together as a couple, while simultaneously wishing that Dana would join Lana Lang in an exploding bus somewhere. I think it might even be fair to say that this episode is really more noteworthy because of what it sets up, with later episodes featuring the Royal Flush Gang, than for what it actually achieves here. So those are my thoughts on this episode. I hope you guys liked this episode, as well as my review of the episode. If you did, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. And if you did like this video, next week I will be talking about an episode of Batman the Animated Series. And the week after that, I will be talking about another episode of Batman Beyond. And don't forget the reviews and stuff that I do on this channel throughout the week. Until then, have a great day.